from Los Angeles, host of the Mo Kelly Show, political commentator Mo Kelly himself, and from Washington, former Republican Congressman, now CNN political commentator, Charlie Dent. Welcome to you both.
Good evening.
Hi, Rosemary.
So, Mo Kelly, I want to start with you and get your reaction to Jerry Nadler defeating fellow veteran Democrat Carolyn Maloney in New York's 12th District primary. New York's redistricting debacle pitted the two against each other, and it got pretty nasty, didn't it, between the two? But what might Nadler's win over Maloney signal to the Democratic Party, and what damage has been done by this bitter fight, do you think?
It was a very weird race, and I would say it's both significant and insignificant. Significant in the way that someone's long congressional political career probably would come to an end tonight, and we see that it's not Jerry Nadler. But I would say it's insignificant because we're not exactly sure whether the farther left wing of the party and also the younger Democrats are going to continue to support this particular leadership within the intra-party politics, whether they still want the leaders of the Democratic Party to be Nadler and company. So I think that remains to be seen. It was a nasty race, and it's good to see Congressman Nadler rise above it in his acceptance speech. But I'm not so sure that we know that this is going to be the future of the party, given the redistricting.
And Charlie, Governor Ron DeSantis will now face Democrat Charlie Crist in what will be one of the most closely watched contests in the country come November. Crist was, as we reported, once a Republican governor himself, and he's going up against the darling of the Republican Party and a man likely to run for president in 2024. So how close might this race get, do you think? And how likely is it that Crist could win perhaps a significant number of disenchanted Republicans?
Well, I'd have to handicap this as a race that would favor Ron DeSantis. He's very well capitalized, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think he has over $130 million in the bank, ready to go. He has a record that he can run on, whether you like it or not. He can run on a record. And of course, Charlie Crist is well known too. But Florida is still, it's a state that is certainly leaning more Republican, but it's still, I wouldn't call it a deep red state by any means. So. Look, we don't know just how the issues will play out. Look, this environment does favor Republicans, but Democrats have some things in their advantage as well. I mean, the Dobbs decision on abortion has certainly energized and intensified the Democratic base and will likely spike turnout to higher levels than you would ordinarily see in a midterm election. But having said that, I just see it as an uphill climb for Charlie Crist to defeat Ron DeSantis in this environment. But I think it could be a reasonably close race.
Mo Kelly, what chances do you think Charlie Crist has here?
I think it's a really uphill climb. I really can't disagree with Congressman Dent in that regard. I would say that although Florida is not necessarily a highly red state, it is a very particularly red state. What I mean by that is you have a Republican governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, both houses, both chambers of the state legislature, both U.S. senators are Republicans. Democrats have not shown that they can win a statewide election in quite some time. And Charlie Crist lost to Rick Scott in 2014, who is arguably more popular now, and Ron DeSantis is more popular now than he was in 2018 when he ran. So it is definitely an uphill battle. Not insurmountable, but definitely uphill.
And Charlie, Democratic Congresswoman Val Demings is projected to win the Democratic Senate primary and will challenge incumbent GOP Senator Marco Rubio, who's already putting out negative ads about her. What are Demings' chances in the very Republican state of Florida, do you think?
Well, I have to say the same thing as I said about the governor's race. I still say advantage Marco Rubio. Yes, Val Demings is a strong candidate, although, again, this is Florida, which has been pointed out by Mo. Democrats have had trouble winning statewide elections for some time now in Florida. And so I do think that Marco Rubio comes in with a strong advantage. But again, the same issues, the Dobbs decision is certainly going to affect things. And to the extent that Donald Trump injects himself, into the midterm election and becomes part of the conversation, that's not something you want if you're Marco Rubio. But still, when I look at history, when I look at how these midterms typically go, I just still see a strong advantage for Rubio. But again, it's Florida, and the race could be, again, closer than I think Republicans would like.
Mo, can Demings at least give Rubio a run for his money, do you think?
Oh, I think so. If anything, the past can be prologue in the sense that Marco Rubio can make a mistake. Val Demings is beloved in Florida. I think that she appeals more to a centrist or maybe just a moderate conservative than other candidates before. She is a former police chief. She rides Harleys. I mean, she can appeal and endear herself to Republicans, and Marco Rubio can make one mistake, which could change the trajectory of that election.
Interesting. And Charlie, I do want to turn now to the ongoing investigation into highly classified documents found at the Florida home of Donald Trump. An ally of the former US president published a letter online from the National Archives that was sent to Trump's legal team confirming that more than 700 pages of classified and special access documents were recovered from Mar-a-Lago back in January. What possible purpose would that have served other than emphasizing the fact that these classified documents could have very well posed a risk to national security by being stored in his home?
Well, I am completely mystified that anyone, including a former president of the United States, could walk out of a government building, the White House in this case, with classified material. The way classified material is handled by those of us who've had the privilege to have a security clearance is that we go into a SCIF, that's a secure containment facility, where we can actually view the material. It's paper. We're not looking at electronics. You turn in your electronics. You can't have them in the room. You look at the paper. You read it. You can ask questions, but then you hand it back and you walk out of the room. No one would ever think of taking classified material with them. Of course, a G-man, a government man, would show up at your door demanding its return. So the fact that Trump's allies are acknowledging he had hundreds of pages of classified material, I think, really is a very serious problem for the president. Many people have lost their reputations, their careers. Some have gone to jail for mishandling classified material. And the question is the former president above the law? Is he going to be held to account? And anybody else who committed these same types of transgressions would be in serious trouble. Now, I think the big question is, what was his motivation? What was his intent? And how did the stuff get down there? I mean, Trump will probably blame others for it being packed and sent to his place, but at the end of the day, he's the one. He's responsible.
Yeah, we still don't know a lot of those answers yet. Mo, where do you see this and other investigations into Donald Trump going? You get the last word.
I think it's more of the same. I've yet to see any inclination of this country that it wants to prosecute a former president. But if there was going to be one, it would be Donald Trump. I think he has to own this in the sense that he doesn't deny that he had the classified information. And obviously, the Department of Justice removed that classified information and SCI information from Mar-a-Lago. It is what it is. The ball's in now the court of the Department of Justice, whether they want to make that next move.
All right, Mo Kelly, Charlie Dent, many thanks to you both. We're going to talk again next hour. See you then.
Thanks, Rosemary.